I will be exploring just why football has become the world's game.
It offers escapism, it offers an opportunity to bond with teammates and to live beautiful moments with your friends, companionship and respect and extreme fire.
He might be winning the 90th minute, maybe the 91st. The opposite team wins. It's the thrill that keeps on going.
The numbers speak for themselves. Football is the most popular team sport in the world. 260 million people play it, and more than 3 billion will watch the World Cup. But when you can hit a ball with a bat, run with it, or try to slam dunk it into a net, why has kicking it between two posts won out? Here come our 10 reasons. Reason 1. Anyone can play football, anywhere, with anything that's ball-shaped.
My name is Musa Okwonga. I'm a poet, journalist and musician. My grandfather used to coach Uganda national side. It's just always been a way that I've communicated with people, I think, before even exchanging language, I suppose. It's democratic. You can play it anywhere. Basketball, you still need the hoop. You still need a certain flatness of surface. Football, you don't even need a flat surface, or football for that matter. You don't even need proper goalposts. You can just throw down and play anywhere, and I think there's a democracy there.
The child who's maybe a bit bigger than the rest, maybe feels a bit different, they can go in goal.
Alison Rudd is a football writer for the Times newspaper in London.
The child who's tinier than the rest will learn how to be tricksy and dart in between the opposition. The player who's fast will rely on their pace. The player who's slow will rely on their ability to see an angle or trap the ball or deceive with a feint of a shoulder. When you start out playing, there is room for everybody in a team. Every shape and size of person, every type of character of person. There's a guy called Tony the Train. He was called Tony the Train because he wore an Argentina shirt and thought he was brilliant, but he only ran in a straight line and he never passed the ball. But it was hard to be cross with him because that's who Tony was, and Tony got a lot out of playing in the park every week, doing what he did best.
Reason 2. When life gets tough, football is an escape, an outlet.
My name is Mirela Grisales. I'm from Colombia and I'm a sports anchor.
Mirella's standout moment was when her team, Nacional, based in the Colombian city of Medellin, won the Copa Libertadores to become the best team in South America.
I was just a child, but I never forget. It was going to penalties, the final. So it was like one of the biggest awards that Colombia ever had in the soccer. Oh my God, it was amazing because it was a very sad time in my country, in Colombia. It was a lot of violence. So finally to have an award that was something different, to win a championship for something good that finally Colombia was doing, that was playing soccer. And for the first time, not talking about war, not talking about weapons, not talking about drugs. For the first time, we were talking about sports. That was very relief, and I think everybody in my country can never forget that time.
Working class people define themselves through the success or failures of their football clubs.
John Williams is a football sociologist at Leicester University.
But they don't have the kind of satisfactions, perhaps, that more middle-class people have in other parts of their lives. They take the game much more seriously. It's one way in which they can experience real collective success. And so they invest emotionally much more in football than maybe people from different class backgrounds do. And I think that's one of the reasons why people feel so deeply about football, but much less deeply about a sport like rugby union. In a city like Liverpool, when Liverpool was going through a very bad time economically in the 1980s, the success of the football club produced a very positive identity for local people in very difficult circumstances. And I think that happens in South America, that happens in Africa, it happens all over the world.
I think in countries where there is hardship, particularly, or political unrest, and doubts about the future, the one constant is your national football team. They can be all the things your representatives are not. Life can be quite dull, but if you've got a football team to look forward to watching them play, that makes life more bearable.
The third reason to love football: you genuinely don't know what's going to happen next.
The unique unpredictability of football is what gives it the addictiveness that keeps people coming back. You've got 11 players on each side, and you've got an unbelievable number of combinations of things that can happen at any one time. You look at a sport like basketball, the best team always wins in basketball because there's so many scoring opportunities. But football, I think, is interesting because you have only really one way to score. It's not like rugby, we've got a drop goal, you've got to try, whatever. There's only really one way to score, get it in the net. And that combination of all these players trying for 90 minutes to score one goal means that you do get unfair results. You do get results where the best team loses and goes home. And I think that sense of unfairness most closely mimics life.
It's a game where anything can happen for the team and sometimes for the individual player.
My name is Hajra Khan, and I am the captain of Pakistan national women's football team. I've been playing football for Pakistan since 2010.
Can you tell me the best goal you ever scored? Can you describe it to me?
We were just at the training session, and I have my right wing cross the ball to me, and I score on my goalkeeper with a back heel volley, right? And, the goalkeeper's like, oh, stop showing off. Do this in the game and prove me wrong. I don't think you can score in the game. And I was like, watch me do that, right? And the next day we were playing against Maldives, and the same winger crosses the ball to me in the D, and I score a back heel volley against Maldives. That was actually my first international goal. And, well, definitely with style for me, at least.
Reason 4, it's almost always decided in 90 minutes, not several days.
Cricket, there's a lot of forms of cricket you can play. There's a one-day thing. There's, it goes on for days, and then, it's just, now people don't want to sit in front of the TV for about like 10 hours to watch a game. Well, there's no results for 2 hours or something, right?
Reason 5, the rules are clear and simple and allow the game to flow. Apart from the offside rule, of course, which everyone pretends to understand, but doesn't really. But it's not always been like that. In the early days, just about anything went. Dr. Ariel Hessian from Goldsmiths, University of London, has studied how football first began in medieval Britain.
The early game would have looked like a riot. And in fact, most observers described them as riots. Players were usually from different villages on a Sunday afternoon at the local common. Numbers could run from typically 50, 100, 150. The ball, inflated pig's bladder, are usually packed with moss or dried peas. And goals tended to be prominent local landmarks, side of buildings, things that caught the attention in a local village or town. Typically a match could last a whole morning or a whole afternoon until the goal had been scored at one particular end.
So not exactly the beautiful game we know today, but gradually things started to change.
Before the rules, there was no need to appreciate the finer arts because it was just about kicking somebody in and winning. And the records are always full of things going wrong, people accidentally running onto knives and dying, getting hit in the head with stones, getting their legs broken during heavy tackling. But once there were rules about what you could and couldn't do, once there was timekeeping, once there was a referee, once the pitch had a limited size, that's when players began to actually develop skills. So one would say probably from the mid to late 19th century, and particularly by the late 19th century, there's an actual appreciation of skill and talent.
Well, that was all down to a man called Ebenezer Cobb Morley. People would do anything to win, including attaching nails, big nails to the front of their boots. And in response to that, players would stuff straw down their trousers, which is a precursor to shin pads, I think. And Ebenezer decided if this game was going to progress, it had to have a set standard. So he devised the basics of football, which is roughly the size of pitch we have now, and 11 players with one goalkeeper who can pick up the ball. Because people who love the game are always trying to make sure that it's about the ability to express. And if you express but get a nail in your kneecap, you're not going to do very well the next time you play.
Reason 6, football becomes more important than where you're from or what your name is.
It's an extension of your identity. It tells you something about the kind of person you are and the way in which you might achieve something in the world that you really can't do through your work or through your home life or in other ways. Football can do that.
It can bring families together. It famously allows fathers to talk to their sons where they might not normally. Just a very useful tool for stopping people having heart attacks because they were so emotionally inept. It allowed them to feel emotion and express it. Sometimes, you will ask about someone in the corner and the first thing someone will say about them is, oh, he's a Spurs fan or she's a Spurs fan. It's the thing that is their identifying characteristic, not, oh, well, they work in the supermarket down the road. That's not so interesting, is it? But the fact that they love their club, that is interesting about them. And it's sort of, once you know that, you can make assumptions about them as well. You know they're going to be dedicated and probably spend all their money on their football team.
Football can be a vehicle for racism and nationalism, but it can also bring people together. Who would have thought that a group of non-Muslim football fans would chant that they wanted to be Muslim, just like their Liverpool hero Mo Salah? Reason 7 to love football. It often used to feel like a ghetto for young men. Not anymore.
I never played soccer because soccer before used to seem like a very male sport. So normally girls would never play in that time in my country. Girls never played soccer because it was too rude, and it was weird to see a woman play. But now it's different. You see girls playing. Before, you see all the guys all together watching the games. Now you see women and men watching a game. I like to see that now.
Hajra Khan hopes the next generation of girls in Pakistan will also take up football, but she warns there are a few two-footed tackles to deal with.
There's a lot of academies, there's a lot of young girls starting playing football. There's a lot of talent, a lot of skillful young girls who would get into it, but unfortunately the system is such at the moment that they're not getting direction or, a solid platform to show their skill. My club, we've trained at cricket pitches because when we'd hire football pitches and if a men's team kind of wanted it at the same time, they were given more preference, they were given more attention over the girls playing football because, it's more important for men to play football. But we played on cricket pitches and we did a pretty good job with the limited resources we had.
The Chinese government is investing very, very heavily in the development and promotion of women's football.
Simon Chadwick is Professor of Sports Enterprise at Salford University in the northwest of England.
In fact, in schools, all Chinese girls in schools are expected to play football just as Chinese boys are. And so I think certainly in the short to medium term, I'm very optimistic about how the women's game will grow and develop. The club that stands out in my mind, and I guess I would say this, wouldn't I, because I'm in Manchester, is Manchester City.
Manchester City's Abu Dhabi-based owners have invested vast amounts of money, £250 million alone last summer on players, and the club has huge global ambitions. Which other parts of the world do you really want to reach, or do you have in your sights as a good potential audience for Manchester City?
The two big markets that we focus on are China and the US. In the US, we have our sister club, New York City FC. We have a club in Melbourne called Melbourne City, but we also have a stake in a club in Japan, the Yokohama Marinos. We have a stake in a club in Spain, Girona, as well as a club in Uruguay, Torque. So really this group and this family of clubs allows us to have a local presence like no other football organization in the world.
I think it's difficult for fans to accept some aspects of globalization, and the idea that a club in Manchester might also own a number of clubs around the world doesn't really fit with the history and tradition of the game. I guess Man City fans would hope that owning other smaller clubs perhaps would benefit the larger club, the host club, in the future. But I think lots of fans are worried about corporate developments in the sport, that they feel that the old equation, the balance between business and sport, has tipped too much to business.
People don't switch, they don't brand switch. And so in those terms, they are a commercial opportunity. And if you think about other brands, whether it's financial services or electronics products or supermarkets, what wouldn't these brands give for the kind of loyalty that football fans very often demonstrate?
Ultimately, sport is viewed by politicians and others as sort of the bread and circus, the pane circo, that keeps the masses entertained. And this is a world of people who are very self-interested and ultimately willing to betray anyone.
Fans are having to pay more and more for tickets and shirts, but the money isn't always going where it's supposed to. Ken Bensinger is an American investigative reporter who's an expert in corruption in world football.
What we're looking at now is the product of about 30 or 40 years of intensely, incrementally increasing corruption within the sport. If you wanted to point a finger at perhaps where the problem starts, I guess it begins with the advent of television and the ability to make money off the sport in ways beyond just selling tickets to matches. Many positions in football don't come with salaries. It's essentially a full-time job to run a football federation. If these positions are not paid, how are these people supposed to pay for their food and pay for their homes and all that sort of thing? And I think because of the way that FIFA developed its payment system, which is to give money every year to every federation around the world, there's currently 211 federations, which is significantly more countries than there are members of the United Nations. Some of these countries are quite small, and they all receive huge payments from FIFA. People see that as a way to promote the sport and also have a nice, comfortable income for themselves.
I always find football mystifying, and that's why I'm an academic who focuses on football, I think, because there seems to be this common consensus that football has problems, and this ranges from match fixing and corruption and illegal betting right through to obscene transfer fees and salaries, issues around the conduct of players. It's almost as though the list is endless. Yet crucially, when the whistle blows, all of that stops and people focus on the game.
Of course it's art. Yeah, even when it's ugly, it's art. I live in a building in Berlin which is brutalist architecture. That's art. Absolutely, it's art. It may not be pretty, but it's vivid, it's striking. That's what art is. It's vivid and it's striking. And I think you look at someone like Andres Iniesta, who recently retired, the great Barcelona and Spain midfielder. What he did was unquestionably elegant and graceful. The clean lines, the running. But what I love about football is the truly, truly great footballers, the ones who elevate, I think, the game to a higher form. The Roger Federers of football, people like Leo Messi, people like Zinedine Zidane, Johan Cruyff, who move so gracefully as if directed by the great ballet directors. And I think the analogy is very fair in that case.
Reason 9. Sometimes the smallest can beat the biggest.
What you've got with your football team is everything that's beautiful about your country. It represents you. And you know if they do well, they'll be famous around the world. So when people talk about a Panamanian or an Iranian player, you feel a little bit of the reflected glory if you're the fan. Yeah, they're mine.
Reason 10.
We won the league by a point and I scored the winning goal. The euphoria. There was a moment like everything, it wasn't like a blackout. Everything in my mind just went absolutely white. And I was like, my goodness, I've scored the goal. Like, this is it. This is it. And I turned around and ran back to the halfway line to my teammates, and my friend ran towards me and lifted me off my feet and basically winded me. The euphoria on my friends' faces to have brought them that happiness is something I'll just never forget.